Hello, everybody. Thank you for the big welcome. I certainly appreciate that. It's great to be here today. And if you are not already standing, I would like for you to do a favor for me and go ahead and stand. And I would like, you can get your yayas out, get a little wiggling done. I'd like for you to cross your legs, left over right, right over left. Doesn't matter. Do your thing. All right, then cross your arms. Maybe if you don't have a suit coat on, interlock your fingers, turn like this, okay? And then take a deep breath. There you go. Now you can sit down. All right. So, my name is Scott Fielle. I'm the Regional Director at Real School Gardens in Texas. We are an educational nonprofit that partners with Title I elementary schools to build gardens and train teachers to use those gardens as a core instructional component in their school culture, day-to-day, math, science, English language arts, so on and so forth. I was introduced to Real School Gardens as a teacher at a school, Westcliff Elementary School in Fort Worth, Texas. And so, there we go. Woo, Fort Worth. And so I've got a lot of stories to tell over the last 12 years or so about school gardens. But I wanted to start with this guy. This is Javier. I met Javier at a school in South Dallas where 99% of the students are on free and reduced lunch, and it's 99% of the students because not all of them turn their forms in. So 100% of the students on free and reduced lunch, and one morning at what we call our Big Dig there in South Dallas at L.K. Hall Elementary School, I was responsible with some of our volunteers for building the vegetable beds, the raised beds, cedar beds. And so I was working with Javier and his father. And so we were measuring out the tablas. I learned that that's what they're called. And we were putting them together. We were making them plush. We were measuring the beds in between, the space in between, to make sure they were equidistant. These beds radiated out from a center like a flower or a star. So it was very important that they were straight and they were aligned. And Javier was taking the lead on this with his uncle and me. We got done, we're standing on the sidewalk, or I was standing on the sidewalk. I was just kind of looking over our work. Yeah, good job, way to go us. And the assistant principal walked up and said, that student that you were just working with? I said, yeah, Javier. She said, I was worried when I saw him come to school this morning. This was a Saturday event. I was worried when I saw him show up. Well, why were you worried? Well, I thought he would maybe ruin the day. Well, why on earth would Javier ruin our day? We just have such a difficult time managing him. He's one of those students. And I said, oh, yeah. Well, garden's great for that. Boys like Javier, girls like Javier, they love it out here. You got to work on getting them out here. Don't use this as a privilege. Use this as a tool to get those students engaged. We learn about our business. Heard it from another teacher. The last teacher that gave me the same message was whispering this in my ear so Javier wouldn't hear her, even though he was standing right there, as he was explaining to a group of first grade girls why the soil in the perennial bed, the bird and butterfly bed, was warm. And he was explaining, see, the FBI is in there. The fungus, the bacteria, and the invertebrates. And when you go to PE and you go run around, you do your thing, and you get all hot, right, and you're doing your work, well then, it's the same thing that's happening in the soil. They're decomposing the things in the soil and producing nutrients for the soil. And so, Javier was getting it, and I could tell somebody from Real School Gardens had gotten a hold of him, somebody else, because he was basically giving that talk the way we would give that talk. So Javier and I ended up kind of being friends that day, and he was helping me load up the van, and we were putting the shovels in and everything, and I think he was calling me Dr. Dirt that day. Students get a choice. I like students to have choices, so Dr. Dirt, Senior Soil, Scott, Mr. Fell sometimes. A lot of them choose Mr. Fell. He was calling me Dr. Dirt, but he called me Scott. We were putting the shovels up, and he said, Scott? And I said, yeah. And he looked up at me, and he said, this was the best day of my life. And so I was touched. I was touched by that. Then I went outside to get some more stuff, loaded up, and Javier's uncle came up to me and told me in Spanish. He said, thank you so much. I did not know how intelligent my nephew was, and today I know. So, what do you see? You're a teacher in a school, you're a parent. What do you see when you look at our students? What are we doing to discover and cultivate those gifts within them? One of the most powerful things we can do for our students and for our employees, for that matter, is discover what their gifts are, what their skills are, and then to nurture those and help them be the best that they can be. And that is one of the promises of outdoor classrooms. Outdoor classrooms provide a context. Ross, They provide a context, they provide an opportunity, they create the conditions for educators to recognize in students what they might otherwise overlook. And that is why I would say outdoor classrooms, school gardens aren't just a nice to have, kind of fluffy little, oh, that's neat for enrichment kind of thing to have at a school. I would say that school gardens and outdoor classrooms should be considered as important as a library or a computer lab in our schools. So, our mission is simple. We create learning gardens that grow successful students. We started out in Fort Worth, Texas, and now in North Texas and Fort Worth, Dallas Metroplex, or Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex if you're from Dallas. I don't think anyone is. We've got about 105 school partners there. We're starting in Maryland, Washington, D.C., Virginia as well. So we reach over 60,000 students in about 4 states, and we are growing. And what we do is we offer a 3-year program where we do 2 things, build and train. And our formula is simple. In the research, the educational research, two of the biggest in-school predictors of student success are awesome teachers, right? And engaged students, right? If you've had an awesome teacher, you know what an awesome teacher is. Some of you may be awesome teachers. I wouldn't be surprised in this room if there were some awesome teachers out there. What is an engaged student? An engaged student has some choices, some autonomy, right? An engaged student has a drive, the intrinsic motivation to want to learn. They have opportunities to feel competent doing the things that they are able to do as students. And so we put these 2 things together. Effective educators plus engaged students equals academic success. And so we do 2 things. We build gardens and we train teachers. Now, we have a participatory design when we build these gardens. And the first thing that happens is the students have a design competition. Then they present those designs at what's called a design and dine. If you've ever done a capital campaign or a design charrette or anything like that, it's a modified, scaled-down version of that. And then we take those ideas that the community gives us, and then we create a design for the school and then help them to build the leadership at the school to lead us to a big dig day where folks like Javier and his uncle can get involved, right? Now, this is where I want to tell you about another school that I've become acquainted with. It's called I Am Terrell. I Am Terrell Elementary School in Fort Worth. And when I was in high school, I was driving by this school with my dad. I didn't know it was a school then. And it's situated in between like 3 highways, kind of sequestered. We were driving by with my dad. We'd driven by this place a million times. So finally, by the time I was 17 or 18, I said, "What's that?" And my dad said, "Well, that's the Burton Housing Project, and there's a school over there. It was named after the first black superintendent of schools, or first superintendent of black schools, because in Fort Worth's history, there were 2 different school districts. So it's named after him, and it's stuck over there, and it's right by the night shelter and Union Gospel Mission and so on and so forth. And so every time I drove by I Am Terrell, first of all, somehow I got the idea from my father that wasn't fair, right? And then the second thing that I always thought when I looked over there was, I just thought, what did I see? I saw poverty. I saw poverty. Well, when I got engaged with that community, they invited us to come to their school because they applied to Real School Gardens. Schools apply to our program, and we vet them. And everybody was going around, we're going to learn where our food comes from, and we're going to learn about math and measurement and life cycles and everything that, that we do in the school gardens. You could tell they really got it, and a parent was there, Karen. And Karen said, "That's all great. That's all really important. But here's what I want. Here's what I want. Because of who we are and because of our conditions, we receive a lot from other people. People give a lot to our school, and people give a lot to our children. And we want our children not just to be recipients, but we want our children to have an opportunity to give back. We want our children to learn what it's like to give someone to something." and to care for something. And that was the first time I almost cried in front of Karen. The second time was at their design and dine. I was sitting with her and her daughters, and it's a design and dine, so we were dining, and there was salad. And her daughter held up a piece of lettuce, and she said, "What's that?" And I said, being the good educator that I am, I didn't tell her the answer. I said, "What do you think that is?" And she said, I think it's a leaf." And I said, "You were right, it is a leaf." And her mom said, "Oh, that's lettuce, baby. That's lettuce." And she said, "Well, I've never seen lettuce like this." And she looked at me and she said, "Mr. Scott?" And I said, "Yeah." She said, "Can we grow lettuce like this in our garden?" And I said, "Well, of course you can." Flash forward several years later, and they are growing potatoes for the food pantry. They are growing produce that's being served at a fancy new American restaurant downtown, and getting to go and eat at that restaurant and having that experience and having the chef come out to their school. And so what do I see when I look at I Am Terrell Elementary School? I see students living in a food desert that are growing vegetables, not just eating them themselves, but donating them. I see students that are going outside to learn math and science and English language arts and being physically active while they're doing it. And I don't just see poverty there anymore. Now, that's because of my particular relationship with the school and what our work is, but I think that's important. So we build gardens and we train teachers. And teachers go to training a lot of times that it's not fun. And as a teacher, I know that. And so one of the things that we strive to do is we strive to have fun. That's the first thing you need to know about our training. The other thing is that everything is through the academic lens. So if we're making a recipe, then it's a math lesson, right? And when we train our teachers, we make sure the whole staff's trained. We make sure they're trained on site with their principal present. And then we do on-the-job training so that teachers can see how it is with their students in a school garden, what it's like to instruct students, and what students' responses are in a school garden. And so the teacher training is very critical. We will never build someone a garden. Well, we don't build it for them anyway. They help. But we will never build a garden and leave. We'll train folks that already have a garden, but we won't ever just build a garden and leave, because this training is so important for the uptake. And where we are at is by the end of an initial 3-year period with Rural School Gardens, a minimum of 60% of the educators at that school are using the garden regularly for instruction. We were doing one of these teacher trainings one time. It was at Ronald McNair Elementary School, again, in Dallas. And I was explaining what we were going to do. And one of the teachers says, "You want me to do what?" And I said, "I want you to be bold. I want you to be a risk taker. I want you to do it for the children." And so she did. She went over and she scooped up about a quarter-size sample of soil and held it in her hand. That's all I was asking them to do, right? So a lot of people, when they see a professionally dressed teacher ready to go to the classroom and they think about a school garden, they think, "Oh gosh, Martha down the hall, this is not going to be her thing." But we have interviewed, we have surveyed hundreds and hundreds of teachers. We have thousands and thousands of surveys. There's an item on there about, "Oh, no, I'm not going to do this. I'm an indoor person." In less than 1% of responses say, "I'm not going to do this. I'm just an outside person." So what do teachers need? Teachers need tools. Teachers need support. I got an email the next day after that training from the garden coordinator that said that teacher was outside that next Monday. Training was on a Saturday. She was out there with her class on Monday. She said, "I need an area to plant." Dorcas said, "Well, they're already taken. You get an earth box." And she said, "Okay, that's what we'll do." So, when we look at a garden, what do we see? We see opportunity. We see math. We see science. We see English language arts. And I'll give you an example. I was walking up to a 5th grade classroom. I was this mentor teacher, and my mentee was teaching upstairs, and I was walking up the stairs to go to class, and I heard his classroom erupting. And I thought, well, this is either going to be really good or this is going to be really bad. So I went up there, and the table in the corner, there was a young man named Anthony going, gross, oh, and everybody was laughing at Anthony because it was funny. Well, what had happened was they had harvested basil, and they were making pesto and pasta, and they'd never had pesto and pasta before, and so they had to get the recipe right. They had to do these conversions, mathematic conversions, to get the right amount of ingredients, and then once they got them all right, then Mr. Mossick would check it off, and then they would get to put it in a food processor, make their own pesto, and have some pesto and pasta. And I said, well, Anthony, buddy, if it tastes so bad, then why are you eating it, you know? Just teasing him, right? And he said, well, we grew that basil ourselves, right? So that's the promise of a school garden. And I'll tell you, too, you want to go into schools, you want to do school gardens, I highly recommend, as an educator and someone that works with educators, to kind of craft your lens and frame it up around what they're already doing in the classroom. They're already teaching math. They're already teaching science, right? And they will get the nutrition piece. It is part of the deal. It can't be avoided. But start where they're at. Much like Brian was talking about, you got to meet people where they're at. If it's the profit motive, that's where you meet people to get things changed. If it's an educator, you figure out as much as you can about their day-to-day and what their life is like, and you try to make a school garden be the thing that makes everything easier for them. Our impact. I don't think I have much more time, so I'm not going to go over this too much, but what we measure over time the effectiveness of the educators in our program over the course of a 3-year period. We take a look at the level of engagement from students. Our teachers report to us that students cite Real School Gardens as a major contributor to increased student engagement. And we've tried to set up some tests to actually go straight to the students. So there's our impact. And so this is a picture of Maple Lawn also in Dallas, and this is a school that Blue Cross Blue Shield of Texas helped us out with. Blue Cross Blue Shield of Texas has helped support 10 school gardens in Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex in the last 2 years. So they are a great partner for us. And if you are working in businesses, in corporate situations, you should consider getting your employees out for a volunteer day in a school garden. Consider finding someone who's trying to work on a school garden and put some manpower towards it, because the school will greatly appreciate it. So when you go back to your community and you look at the schoolyard, just ask yourself, what do you see here? What's possible? And at Real School Gardens, we look at the future and we envision a world where school gardens are just a part of school and they enrich every child's life. And we are currently going into planning to grow across the country. So maybe we'll see some of you out there. And the last thing I'd say about school gardens, there's a quote I like from Buckminster Fuller, and I'm paraphrasing, but he says, when I'm working on a problem, I don't think about beauty. I only think about solving that problem. But when I'm done, if the solution isn't beautiful, then I know it's not the right solution. So I would say in our education system today that Real School Gardens are one beautiful solution. School gardens in general are one beautiful solution because they can accomplish so many things in one place. Thank you so much for having me.